think we have a quorum, and it is exactly, let's see if it's 8 o'clock. It is 8:01, and so I think we can get started, and I appreciate everybody getting out so early this morning. And Department of Transportation is first. Thank you, Commissioner. And if you'd like to go on and get started.
Yes, we will. We'll be efficient. Thank you, Madam
Angela,
Chair.
thank you for what you did.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. We'll jump right in. First thing we'd just like to acknowledge in the FY17 budget is a little bit of a change that you'll notice is a collapse.
Just a minute. I think y'all have a
there is a handout.
Handout
yes.
too. And on the, what page, let's see, we're on our tracking sheet so everybody can find it in the.
Back 2 or 3.
Okay, it starts on 47.
It's on page 10, 12, 10 and 12.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Okay.
I should have done
No
that
problem.
first. Thank you.
No problem.
I will not interrupt you anymore.
Oh, no worries at all. And what we'll do is try to use our handout in a little bit in conjunction maybe with what you have and try to go in that. They should link up a little bit. So what I wanted to note first was in the FY17 is a little bit of a change and collapse of 3 programs into one of the capital construction, capital maintenance, and local roads administration into the capital projects budget. And the reason for doing that, and we're very grateful for this opportunity to do that, is again to give us the maximum flexibility now with HB 170 dollars and federal dollars where we can be strategic in the use of those dollars. And instead of being locked into those budget categories as things come up, our planning director, Jay Roberts behind us, they can be strategic in the planning of those projects that where we can utilize our federal funds on things that are a little bit easier lifts from the environmental process, a little more streamlined, and take the state funds to projects that are a little more complicated and get things done a little sooner than later. So it gives us a lot of flexibility we've never had before. So being able to do this allows us to collapse this, gives us maximum flexibility to be strategic and use our dollars in a very efficient fashion. So on the next handout is just the overview. These bar charts give you a good basis of what the blue is sort of was the base 16 budget of 1.03 billion, and now what the recommendation is 1.84 billion. And the green sort of shows you where the HB 170 investment or revenues are applied across the program categories. And so what I'd like to do is just walk through each of those program categories, which should sort of follow along. And so the first one is the capital projects. And the capital projects, you can see totals $812 million, which is a sizable increase. It's a 202% increase over the base of 16, and that's recognizing the HB 170 dollars coming in there. And again, sort of what that gives you as a sort of an output is at least 55 bridges to be replaced, resurfacing over 330 projects, 49 intersection projects, and 31 roadway projects that are their capital construction output. That does not include right-of-way, all the right-of-way that will be purchased, and the design and environmental work. So that's a very big investment in capital projects, and will certainly begin to move the needle in a big kind of way. So very, very glad for that. In the next bar is the general operations category, which consists of several components, one being the construction admin component of that, and that seeing an increase, about a $14 million increase in construction admin. Part of that is merit pay adjustments. The other part of that is now to be able to utilize state dollars to deliver the projects that are state funded. As a reminder, in the past, we always had capital projects that were federal, and so for the design, for the right-of-way, for the construction management, all those things we had a federal match component of that. Now we're able to do almost double the work, so we have to be able to fund those administrative parts of delivering the project. So that's where that comes in. The department admin is a component of that as well. That has a merit pay-based adjustment. I'll show you a total of that in just a minute. Also, those department admin are again for the for all the things it takes to deliver a state-funded program now. So remember, we're almost doubling our work, and we don't have the federal dollar to charge to for those state-funded projects, which is not a bad thing. It's really a good thing. A couple other increases in there. There was a little bit of a ERS cost in there for some timekeeping software, about $800 to $1,000 to $1 million in there. Some other things there that just sort of, again, from an administrative point of view. Data collections, we take actually a redistribution in that category. So for some things that we no longer have to do federally, so those dollars are being redistributed. So we're trying to be strategic and savvy in our use of all our dollars. And there was an adjustment in planning, again, not having to match some federal dollars anymore, so that freed up $750,000. It gets redistributed inside this same general operations category. And then traffic management was an adjustment there, about $3 million, a little over $3 million for signal timing, projects, things like that, or traffic operations that can be state funded. So it helps us, again, to deploy those resources very effectively. The next category on the bar chart is the LMIG, and this is one that we should all be very excited about. It's recognizing an additional $41 million. So you get about $165 million now that's going to LMIG. That's a 33% increase that your local governments, your cities and counties will see in the FY17 budget. And again, that will be distributed on formula basis, the same kind of program that exists today, but your cities and counties can all expect across the board about a 33% increase. That is fantastic news for the local governments, and they can do certainly much more infrastructure investment themselves. In routine maintenance, next category over, you can see $423 million total. That's about a $200 million increase, which is all going to contract to our preventive maintenance, okay? So all those dollars are going out for contract work to do preventive maintenance, of which generally our men and women have traditionally done. Our men and women will continue to do the preventive maintenance, but this gets us on the backlog, getting things taken care of in the way they need to be. And I always like to say this is, the ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. Well, in pavement preventive maintenance, $1 of investment saves you $6 on rehabilitation. So this is money well spent, and you'll see a big difference. You'll see a big difference in the fiscal year 17 in the overall roadside conditions, appearance, and maintenance, no doubt. Next, just to mention along that bar chart is payments to CERTA. Really no increase or decrease in this category, but just a fund source swap. Part of that is about $36 million came from the HB 170 fee component, so that replaces general funds, comes out of the fee component, so just showing you what that is. And then finally on general obligation debt, $138 million, again really no increase or decrease, but applying HB 170 revenue or the fee component of that to displace general funds. So there's basically now a way to pay that general obligation debt with fee component, which frees up excise to do these other things like in the capital program. So certainly a benefit. On the next slide over is FY17 governor recommendation for merit-based pay. This is just a breakdown of what you want to see, the 3% recommendation for merit pay increase. By category, it just gives you a sort of a breakout so you can see what those funding categories look like. $6.4 million total impact, and I would be remiss if I didn't thank the governor and you for your support for state employees for a consideration for merit pay increase. Next slide is fiscal year 17 intermodal budget request, and in this we're looking for a change at about $1.597 million. In this category, that will be applied to the aviation program, of which totals $13.2 million. And I know this has been a point of conversation before. So the jet fuel exemption actually funds $13.2 million of the intermodal program now. So where that was coming out of general fund, it was general fund money. Now that jet fuel exemption funds the 13.2. and the adjustment is 1.5, so an increase. And I think this is one, again, as I've mentioned previously, we'll keep an eye on with Department of Revenue and see what that revenue actually looks like once we have a full year of collections under the belt. Just as a reminder, as always, this part of the program, the intermodal program, even though the total budget is $17.9 million, it leverages about $66 million of federal. This money pays it forward, if you will, a little bit on the federal program. In all our programs, which includes airport aid, as I mentioned, ports and waterways, of course, the Savannah Harbor expansion is critical, rail and transit. On the next slide is the governor's bond request, recommendation for bonds. And again, this year, a recommendation for $100 million for bonds for the repair, replacement, and renovation of bridges across the state. Last year, in fiscal year 16, that $100 million got 25 bridges underway to get replaced. And furthermore, what that did is when we were able to advance those bridges, Director of Planning was able to advance 58 more bridges into design, if you would, accelerate them into the pipeline so that we can get those replaced sooner. So that has a big multiplier effect. So also in FY17, we'll be continuing to bundle local projects, local county roads and city streets into design build contracts, 3 to 5 bridges at a time across the state, so that we're getting those local road bridges replaced and doing it through a design build methodology so we can get that investment out there quick. And so they can get out working and designing at the same time. So that's fantastic. So we would anticipate another 20 to 30 bridges based on condition assessment for $100 million bonds, gets you somewhere in that 25 to 30 range probably, bridges across the state. And so that would again accelerate those replacements so that we can continue to backfill with the design so that we can keep our bridges moving forward. And as a reminder, state routes have about 11% bridges that are structurally deficient and functionally obsolete, which means they don't meet the current safety standards. The local roads, 18% of the bridges are structurally deficient or functionally obsolete. So this moves the needle in getting those bridges replaced. Next on the bond request is a little bit that you'll hear more about from Greta for renovating express coaches, which is critical for mobility in this region, to having good state-of-the-art express buses, and then property acquisition. I'll let Chris Tomlinson and gang talk about that a little bit more. Again, we're just sort of the conduit for that bond request. And finally, on the next slide over is just a little bit, again, just to touch base on staffing levels of where we are. From 2011 to 2016, we've experienced about a 13.5% decrease in staff. We went under the 4,000 full-time employee mark back in December. That's an all-time low. We're where we need to be, and we engage about 170 to 200 temporary employees in the maintenance arena as well. So we have to stay there, but I just want you to understand that from the efficiency and effectiveness of a state agency, we're very committed to be lean and mean, and we're about to deliver almost another $800 million of projects out there with the same staff. So we'll continue to use consultant services. We redeploy our staff to be effective to how we can manage this effectively, and continually to really put a lot of work out there for the state, across the state, with a very lean and efficient staff. So we'll continue that. Finally, I think we have to conclude in the presentation there is these are your dollars building a better Georgia. We're very excited for this opportunity that has presented itself to make a huge impact on all of Georgia. And we just thank you for your support of that. Thank you for your favorable considerations, and I'll be glad to entertain any questions.
Thank you so much, and thank you for the job you're doing. Let's see. We've got several questions. First of all, we'll have Chuck Station. I pronounced your. Was she? You want to go? Okay. Jan, Representative Tanksley, excuse me.
Thank you for that great presentation. I've been really concerned about our bridges for a number of years.
Are you on?
Not all of us. Am I now?
I can hear you.
I think you got me punched. She's 22.
What I said.
But I do have a
I'm on
question.
now. I'm on now.
Okay.
Okay. Anyway, I appreciate the great work you're doing, and I'm really pleased to hear that report on the bridges because being a county commissioner for 10 years prior to being here, I've had the opportunity to look at our situation with bridges, and GDOT came out with a huge report in 2008. So with all the good things that you reported this morning, I just wanted to ask, do you have a way that you prioritize whether it's a local road, state road, the need? And then the second part of that question for me is, I know we have a piece of legislation coming up where there's a request to increase the weight of trucks that are transporting timber. And so my question would be, on the bridges that are really not safe, they're already posted with a weight limit. How do we, if we pass a law like that, how do we know that their route's not going to include one of these bridges?
Okay. Well, first, let me go back. The prioritization, yes, there's a prioritization. And we inspect every bridge in this state, city streets, county roads, and state routes, interstates, every 2 years. So we do those inspections and provide those detailed reports. So we have a good analysis of several components of condition of bridges, which goes into a formula that gives an overall sufficiency or sort of a health index of the bridge. But then we factor in things is, what is that route on? Is that route where that bridge is, does it serve a hospital? Is it a hurricane evacuation route? Does it serve, what's the detour length? We actually calculate in, if that bridge has an issue or is not functioning, what's the detour length around? And that includes fire and emergency when the loads go down, when a fire truck and an ambulance can't get across it. So those rise to the top especially emergency service, fire truck, EMS, and school bus gets points, if you will, it moves it up the prioritization list. So we do take a very strategic approach on how to do that. The issue we've had before was we were doing about $130 million a year to replace all the bridges in Georgia. Now we're going to $330 million or so, going to hover in that area. So we're really doubling the investment in bridges, and that's all bridges, not just state routes. Previously, we just sort of focused on the state routes because the traffic volumes are usually higher, but now we can get at that. To the notion of increased weights. So what happens, again, a bridge is designed to carry so much weight, and that's theoretically when it's brand new. It's just like anything. It's brand new, it's the best, and the conditions continue to degrade. So we look at that. So increased weights, we have to go back and recalculate what if it would hold an increased weight. And when we did this last year, and the data is still pretty close, there is a significant more bridges that would then require posting. If the weight increases, then more bridges have to be posted, and then you'd have to go around. So it's a little bit counterintuitive. You can be more efficient if you can put more weight on a truck, but then your route gets longer because you're having to detour across. But those bridges are no longer available to drive across at one weight, and if you increase the weight, then you have to go around. And that's assuming that everybody obeys the law, and I'm sure most people do. But I think Department of Public Safety writes a lot of tickets for people being overweight.
If I could ask one more question. At one point in time, you also had a program with GDOT that was safe sidewalks to schools. Has that program been refunded, or is there any possibility that it will be? Because there are certain little small cities, or especially one in my district, that has a couple of state routes that come through, and they desperately need sidewalks along those state routes. When the new schools were built, the need for the sidewalks is not on Board of Education property. So it's just at a huge cost. And I know you did have that program. I thought it was a good program, and I just wondered where that stands.
Yeah, so that program actually was a federal program, Safe Routes to School program. And in this last transportation bill, that program really went away. Mm-hmm. There was actually dedicated funding federally for that program. We're actually going to continue a piece of that program, which is the education piece, to some degree. The funding for that diminishes over time in the federal bill. So there's not really a program for that. I would say, though, on those kind of needs, so I think, again, this increase in the LMIG certainly gives cities and counties an opportunity for dollars they haven't had to look at that. And of course, we need to any of your constituents or school systems when they're doing something or see those needs, we make and incorporate that. That's one of the considerations that anytime we do a project, we need to look for those opportunities if we're out there doing some kind of project. But, you know, as those come up, certainly be in tune and we can figure out if there's some other means. But that federal program did go away.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Representative Shaw. Mike, Representative Dudgeon, okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Madam Chairman, I got 3 quick questions. Last year when talking through 170, the maintenance was obviously a huge problem with being once every 50, 60 years, whatever, for some of the roads. You've doubled the spending on maintenance. Does that get us to the levels that we want to be? In other words, is that enough money to get to whatever the recommended numbers on maintenance are? Or because we put a lot of money towards projects, I think is fine. I'm not wondering. Last year with so much emphasis on the maintenance, I want to make sure that you believe that we're where we need to be on those schedules.
Yes, it gets us into a lot better situation. And not only the routine maintenance there, my ounce of prevention analogy, but in the capital program too, the capital maintenance piece goes we've been around 100, well I guess it was about 200 or so. It was actually 150 or so. We're going to about 400 million a year across the state. And so that gets us really our condition levels back to being maintainable. And as you look out over time, we peak up because it takes a little more work to get things back in a decent condition, and then you can maintain them. So we sort of peak up and then drop off, and we showed that at the sort of the 10-year plan and show what that looks like. So we get things back to where we're in fair or better condition across the state. That doesn't mean that every state route's going to be shiny and black.
No, I'm just saying, are we where you think we need to be as far as that funding level on maintenance?
This gets us to ability where we can be very sustainable, get things back to a decent condition, and then be sustainable. Okay.
Second question, Madam Chair, is you mentioned, I think, $3 million towards technology-based things like signal timing and things like that. I think that's great. I know in the past without the budget, we've had a hard time starting some of those projects, but I firmly believe that there's a lot of real wins there in spending what, relatively speaking, a small amount of money to relieve congestion. So I'm hoping that the department is very aggressive in pursuing partnerships with people doing the latest signal timing, video intersection monitoring, things like that. So if you could comment on that a little bit, I'd appreciate it.
Absolutely, and well said. It doesn't. You get good efficiencies out of the sort of low-hanging fruit, and so what this really does gives us the ability to partner and to do more maintenance. And a traffic signal maintenance is key. If the detectors are not working, then that signal is not efficient. So this gives us the ability to expand that. Previously, we were using our limited federal dollars, they're maxed out. And I give you an example, last week, regrettably, when our state trooper was shot on I-75, the Cobb Parkway actually is a coordinated signal pattern, and they were immediately able to go change the signal timing to make Cobb Parkway all green to try to move all that I-75 traffic. Now, ultimately, you have 6 lanes of interstate on a 4-lane road. The math just doesn't work. But those are the kind of things that technology-wise that really can make a difference, and we want to continue to expand those corridors across the region because the technology exists and we can still deploy that.
Yeah, that's great because like you said, the bang for your buck there, relatively low dollars without having to do a big capital project to add lanes where we can do that. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Peck.
Thank you, Chair. Commissioner, it's an exciting time to be the Commissioner of DOT.
It is.
And I, for one, am glad you're there and got a lot of confidence in you and your team at a pivotal point in our state's history. And grateful for your leadership already and looking forward to seeing what else you got to do. The $800 million that's roughly allocated to the HB 170, my question to you, and maybe to Mr. Roberts too, is there I can't remember in the bill, is there flexibility of how you allocate that $800 million? I mean, now you got roughly $500,000 to the capital projects, $40 million to LMIG, and another $200 million to routine maintenance. Was there flexibility, or is that going to change every year?
So on LMIG, let me just start there. LMIG, recommendations at 10%, and statutory it can be between 10 and 20%. So again, we went to 10, 33% increase to try to move more of that to capital. So
Okay.
we really, when you look at those funds, we said, okay, LMIG, routine maintenance, again, trying to get the backlog of the work that needs to be done. I mean, just over the weekend here in Atlanta, we had a big wall, had a washout behind it, big washout, had to close down a ramp and all those kind of things. Those routine maintenance things, the cleaning drains and all that, we've got to just take care of the house. But then we try to leverage the most into the capital project program, that 800 and something million, so that it really makes a difference back to, pavement preservation, resurfacing, replacing bridges, and really trying to make a difference there. So there was nothing that specifically said that percentage-wise where it had to go. We strategically do that, again, trying to fulfill what the Joint Study Committee's outcome was, you need to get back to taking care of your maintenance conditions. And then the bill also, as you remember, had the 10-year plan. Part of that was to focus on trying to bring relief to congestion where it's needed and provide economic development across the state where it's needed. So I think we've got a good blend of that.
And so you anticipate probably on a going forward basis that allocation will be similar to what we're seeing in this year's budget. And,
Yes.
but you're not bound or constricted by the law, except for, I guess, LMIG, certain percentage.
That's correct.
Right, okay. And I'm sorry,
Go
in the
ahead.
100 million, I guess, for bonds, are you anticipating that that's going to be kind of an ongoing request on, I know that's a one-time big hit right now, but I mean, are we looking at?
I would encourage that. I don't know that I could look for that, but
Yeah.
I certainly would encourage that, especially, when you look at the use of bonds in a bridge. I mean, us engineers say a bridge is not a bridge, it's a monument, because you build it to be there for 50 to 75 years. And we're actually getting them now to about 75-year lifespan. So that is a good use of a bond dollar, because you get a return on that over time, significant investment over time of something that really doesn't depreciate a lot. So that makes a big difference, and it actually helps us leverage. Well, having that $100 million there, just like last year, it helps us get more bridges in the pipeline to get them replaced sooner, still using that capital allocation, that capital budget allocation to replace those bridges and do the maintenance that's need to be done on bridges. And it just gives you a big jump start. I mean, it's really a shot in the arm and it's really, I can tell you, it's a strong statement to other states that Georgia means business about taking care of its infrastructure, because that's the one thing that everybody relates to, is how critical a bridge is. And it doesn't matter if it's the small rural county road or one out here on the interstate. Everybody knows a bridge is critical for those reasons we've talked about already. So it's a big help, and we would be greatly appreciative if that continued.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions? Well, if there are no other questions, thank you, and thank you for the job that everybody's doing over at DOT, and we do appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Department of Community Affairs. Good morning. Representative Knowles and Mr. Ellis, nice to have y'all here this morning.
Thank you. Good to be with y'all, and thank you for the opportunity to talk about our fiscal year 17 budgets for the Department of Community Affairs and the One Georgia Authority. Within the DCA budget, you will see the common changes that apply to all agencies, including the governor's recommended salary increases, merit system assessments, and insurance premiums to the Department of Administrative Services. Beyond those common changes, we have two other changes in the DCA budget. First is a transfer of $224,902 from the administration program to the Special Housing Initiatives program to fund the Home Access program. The Home Access program provides grant awards of up to $15,000 to improve the accessibility of owner-occupied homes for those with a disability, and those grants allow for those individuals with modifications to remain in their homes and avoid unnecessarily entering into a nursing home. The average annual cost for nursing home care in Georgia is $59,000, with $34,500 of that being direct state cost. With the additional funding for the home access program, we estimate that we can serve another 38 people with disabilities. Allowing those individuals to remain in their homes creates a net savings in nursing home costs of over $1 million a year. The second change is an increase of $10 million to the Regional Economic Business Assistance Grants, or REBA. As you probably know, the REBA program provides critical incentive funding leveraged by private investment to bring quality jobs to Georgia, and we partner very closely with our colleagues at the Department of Economic Development in administering that program. Within the last 5 years, we've made 46 REBA awards of $19.6 million to key projects around the state that have leveraged over $2 billion in private investment and created or retained 17,000 jobs. Within the One Georgia budget, the governor has also recommended an additional $10 million to help fund economic development projects around the state. The One Georgia Authority supports economic development through the EDGE and equity programs. Similar to the REBA program, DCA partners with the Department of Economic Development to administer One Georgia's EDGE program, which provides incentive funding to businesses locating in Georgia. Within the last 5 years, the EDGE program has provided $78.6 million in funding for 54 projects. Combined, these projects have generated almost 18,000 jobs and provided significant economic impact to communities across the state. One Georgia's equity program, which focuses on community capacity building, has funded 79 projects, totaling $43 million over the last 5 years to help prepare regions and communities for economic growth through the financing of infrastructure improvements, acquisition of land for the development of industrial parks, and the construction of capital assets. Increased funding in both the REBA program and the programs of One Georgia will help the state continue to prepare communities for economic growth and help bring quality jobs to Georgia. I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you. Representative Pig.
Chair, Ms. Knowles, I hadn't seen, I know we passed the Renaissance Act a couple of years ago, which was to incentivize development in downtown, and I don't think we've ever funded it, I don't believe. Have you been in discussion DCA with the governor's office about?
We continue mostly to work through our Office of Downtown Development and our Downtown Development Revolving Loan Fund to work with downtowns on downtown development and technical assistance through our Main Street program, but we've not had discussions about
Yeah, okay. I hope we take a good look at that. I know we passed that legislation. The incentive was to kind of spur some development in our downtowns. That was kind of the motivation behind the bill, but I know we've never put any money in it. So anyway,
Okay,
thanks.
thank you.
Representative Dudgeon.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I know in the amended budget in One Georgia we had money for the classroom digital learning expansion stuff. So, I should know this, but I don't know this. That's not in here because I believe that finishes the last phase of that. But the $10 million for One Georgia is just general funds. It's not targeted for anything specific. Is that true?
Correct. The classroom connections was in the amended, and this is more towards the economic
What I
development.
thought. And so it's a pretty hefty increase in both the REBA and the One Georgia. I mean, almost 50% in each one. Again, is there anything targeted for that? Is that just trying to get more grants approved, or I don't know? It just seems to me like a pretty large increase. I wanted to know sort of what the motivation was.
Well, I think we work very closely with our colleagues at Economic Development, and they seem to have a lot of projects in the pipeline that would utilize that funding. And then on our side for the equity, of course, there is a great need for communities that have some capacity building need, whether that's land acquisition or infrastructure assets, to make sure that they can accommodate any industry that would want to locate.
On the REBA side, are those grants just purely from the state? Is there local components? Is there private components? I don't want to get in the weeds, but just curious about how those work just real quickly.
So the REBA is state funding, but I believe they always leverage a private investment as well as job
I see heads nodding over there. Okay, thank you.
Sort of as a follow-up to the questions he asked, and this doesn't have anything to do with the budget. I was just wondering, we lost a big company because of y'all weren't excluded, y'all were on open records, and is that, and there's a bill coming forth to protect y'all from having to say something about these projects? Is that not right?
I believe that's correct. I would maybe defer to our friends at Economic Development.
Okay, all right, thank you. Because I know how important it is, because y'all are really the bank, and y'all these things need to be remain confidential on both sides. So, because we don't want to lose any other big things because of not leaks. It wouldn't be a leak because they had a right to find out.
Right.
We want to close all those loopholes. Are there any other questions? One other thing too, in this Safe Georgia, I know that this Home Safe. Do we have any? Are we going to be able to use all those funds that were allotted in Home Safe?
We are working diligently to make sure we utilize all of that money. The program expires at the end of 2017, and so we're working closely, tracking our monthly spend rate to see if we need to make any changes to make sure we're helping the most people and getting that money out the door.
Okay. No other questions? Thank you, and thank you so much for coming, and thank you for the job you do.
Thank you so much.
Let's see who we have next. Greta and Serta. Good morning. Thank you for coming, and we're so lucky that Mr. Thomason, a commissioner, wears two hats, and Kurt, I always have trouble pronouncing your last name.
Well, I'm not going to tell you. It's Fellstool. It's a Norwegian name.
Would you say it again?
Fellstool. Just pretend that J's not there.
Okay. That's not a real common name in South Georgia, is it?
I confess to being from Iowa originally.
Thank you. Thank you so much for being here, and
Thank you.
Commissioner.
Thank you. And we provided a presentation and combined the presentations for both SRTA and Greta. And really on a going forward basis, you're going to see me doing as much of that as possible where it makes sense to try to combine them and help reduce the alphabet soup of agencies. But if you look at slide 2, which outlines the FY17 Governor's recommended budget for CERTA, or the Tollway Authority, as Commissioner Russell outlined, there's really only two changes. One is an increase in the level of funds or payments to CERTA in the amount of approximately $2.2 million. And that reflects an increase in the amount of debt service that must be paid in FY17 on the bonds that we manage and administer on behalf of the Department of Transportation. The second change is just a fund source swap. As Commissioner McMurray outlined, we have an increase in the amount of general funds, and that's possible due to the fee portion of HB 170. But all the governor's recommending is a corresponding decrease in the amount of state motor fuel funds that would have gone to debt service. So again, allowing more of the excise tax, which is constitutionally limited to roads and bridges, to stay with the department, to go directly for use on the projects that they've outlined in their presentation. And the remaining amount of motor fuel, excuse me, and general funds that are coming to us is all being used for debt service. The only exception is of all the funding that you see, approximately just under $13 million is for the Georgia Transportation Infrastructure Bank program. And that's all the recommendations and changes as it relates to the CERTA budget in FY17. Switching to Greta. Just like the last two presentations, there's certain administrative changes that are in line with the governor's recommendations. The governor's recommendation includes $48,430 for merit-based increases. So again, thank you for that. That is something we will look at putting to good use to reward the dedicated employees that we have. Second is a subtraction of approximately $2,000 to reflect a projected decrease in agency premiums. And the last is just $481 to reflect the paperwork for teamwork billing, which is driven a lot by the Affordable Care Act paperwork requirements. Switching to the capital side, the recommended budget doesn't include a request for bond funds of $6.8 million. That breaks down into two pieces, $1.8 million for the renovation of 24 express coach buses. And if you turn to the next slide, slide 4, you would see what that money is going towards. Greta has a fleet of 166 commuter coach buses. The oldest buses were put into service at the very beginning of the service in 2004, and many of those coaches are still on the road today. We're coming up on 12 years of service. Those buses are at the end of their useful life unless we undertake some major rehab or renovation. We're fortunate that we're here in the South. The overall body of the buses, the chassis are in good shape. We don't have the salt problems, et cetera. But those engines, the interiors, it is really time to rehab them. And if we do this, we'll be able to extend the useful life of those buses for an additional 4 years. So from 12 years, extending the use of these coaches for out to 16 years. The reason the amount, relatively speaking, is only $1.8 million, we have access to federal grant funds and other Greta funds for matching. So there's really about $9 million that would go into rehabbing approximately 24 of the buses. So this is a first request, but over the years, we need to cycle through these buses in the fleet. The last time Greta bought any new buses was in 2011. So it's an aging fleet, but it is a very viable service. And in order for safety, reliability, and good customer service, we really need to make this investment in the fleet. Turning to slide 5, the other part of that $6.8 million request is $5 million for really capital expansion focused on park and rides. The diagram that you see on the slide, you may recognize it from the announcements that the governor and Commissioner McMurray made several weeks ago about future expansions of the managed lane system. What we're looking at doing is along the existing projects that are already under construction, the Northwest Corridor project that goes from Cobb up into Cherokee, and then the 75 South project, which is down in Henry County. We're looking at adding new park and rides that coincides with those projects. A lot of people have a misconception that the managed lane projects, the toll projects, are really only serve the commuters, those people driving their personal vehicles, but it's actually an essential asset for us for the transit service. On I-85, there are 8 commuter routes that utilize that lane. 5 are run by Greta, 3 by GCT. Those 5 that we run are amongst our most on-time and best performing routes. Those buses in that lane represent less than 2% of the vehicles in that lane, but they're responsible for moving over 26% of the people that get through that lane. Or put very simply, for each one of those buses you see, that's approximately 45 cars that are not on the road. So as GDOT and working with my CERTA hat now, as we expand the managed lane network, it's actually critical, and we plan our future expansions on the Greta Transit side to coincide with it. So specifically for Northwest Corridor, that project begins at its northern end up at Hickory Grove Road. This money would help us locate a new park and ride, locate and construct a new park and ride at Hickory Grove Road. The partnership and collaboration that's happening between our authorities and the department allows for that particular location to be built on property that's already owned by the department. So these funds are going to help with the construction of the park and ride. And then we're going to acquire some new coaches so we can expand service and fully utilize that facility. Next would be an expansion of the existing park and ride lot around Town Center, Big Shanty Road. We already have routes in this corridor. They're already popular. We project that ridership will increase because, again, of the speed that they'll be able to take advantage of with these projects. All vehicles will be towed in these projects with the exception of public transit, thereby hopefully encouraging more people to use the express bus option. Last but not least, we want to look at a new park and ride at Roswell Road. That project will have a new dedicated entrance.
Just a minute. They can't hear you on the video. Would you please pull your mic closer? Thank you.
Last but not least, we want to look at a new park and ride at Roswell Road. Roswell Road will have a brand new access point to these managed lanes. Dedicated access point. It's separate from those for the I-75 general purpose lanes. So locating a park and ride there would be an ideal location. And we are seeking approximately $17 million in federal grant funds that these funds will be used to match. And so we're working closely with our partners at the Federal Transit Administration for that. And last but not least, on 75 South, we are interested in acquiring property to locate a park and ride that will also be able to utilize that facility. So that's what the $5 million of the $6.8 million in grant funds are for. Excuse me, of bond funds are for. With that, Madam Chair, happy to take any questions.
I have a question. Representative Dudgeon.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I should know this being my second year on the committee, but if we do the expansion on the park and rides and get more ridership on the Greta lines, does that going to require more operational money eventually from the state, or from a subsidy point of view, is that going to break even? Is that going to be federal money? In other words, if I do the park rides and I double your ridership tomorrow, does that going to require more ongoing state money, or how is that going to work?
That's an excellent question. Anytime we expand service, it does result in an increase in operational costs. However, as we look at starting up a new service, there's typically available federal funding which will cover over 80% of the cost of starting up those routes, and would cover it for at least the first 3 years. So when you crunch all those numbers, we believe that would take approximately a $200,000 increase in our operational costs to run those routes. And that is before we've looked at what we would get in the fare box revenue. After those 3 years, what we're in the planning process of doing now is understanding when those federal funds run out, how else can we subsidize it in that corridor. But to Representative Dudgeon's question, with transit does not pay for itself. In rough numbers, very rough numbers, because each route's different, we typically seek approximately 25 to 30% recovery from the fare box, approximately 25 to 30% federal participation, and then what the General Assembly has done is provide us operational funds through appropriations.
Okay. Thank you. I was thinking that was about right. I just wanted some confirmation. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Watson.
Thank you. I was just curious, how much do these coaches cost these days, buses?
That's my favorite question. And normally, and I'm not going to do it today, I ask people, how much do you think they cost? One of those coaches that are 45 feet long, they cost approximately $675,000 to $700,000 a piece.
Gosh.
When I ask folks how much, I hear anything from $100,000 to $250,000, and all we can say is we wish. And again, and so that really underscores why we want to find ways to extend the useful life. Rehabbing the buses will probably cost us approximately $250,000 a piece, as opposed to purchasing one outright. But eventually, with this fleet, we will have to look at purchasing new buses.
Do we have anybody in Georgia that sells those buses?
I'm not
Good
aware of
question.
any manufacturers that are based here, and I think Florida would be some of the closest places where they do like the major rehab. But short answer is no.
Bluebird.
But do they do coach buses?
Yeah, so Bluebird offers some products. It's when we've looked at them in the past. So we've looked at them in the past, and they haven't offered the product that we've needed. But they would be a potential bidder on a project.
Representative Shaw.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I don't know what's wrong with
Let's get the volume down a little bit.
You mentioned the infrastructure.
What number is it? 16.
Touch on that, where that's related in here with
Yes.
CERTA or GERTA,
Yes.
how that works.
So CERTA, or the Tollway Authority, administers the Infrastructure Bank, which is a revolving grant and loan program. We are currently in evaluation on our 4th round of funding. To date, we've awarded approximately $55 million, which has enabled total project value of approximately $200 million to go forward. On this current round, we received 45 project applications. Each one of those has asked for a grant. Having a grant and loan program, the grant is surprisingly much more interest, but we did receive 5 loan applications on some of those projects. So in other words, we saw some people ask for part in grant and part in loan. In the base budget, there's approximately $13 million, $12.999 million, and that allows us to continue to have our rounds. The projects, we look at the benefit of the project, its economic development impact, et cetera, and it's been a program that's been especially popular amongst community improvement districts. One of the hallmarks of the program over time has been skin in the game, if you will, for the applicants. So a lot of people look to this program to provide that last mile funding. They have a good project, usually an innovative one, but there's a funding gap. And so it's a competitive program. So one of the places people try to distinguish themselves is how much other funds they're bringing to the table. We've seen anywhere from, for every dollar in GTIP funding, there's been 3 other dollars already in the project, up to a high of, for every dollar requested, up to 7 other dollars already in the project.
I know we touched on this last year, but there was only one application down in the southern end of the state. Did you have any since then? Were there any successful applicants from down there?
Thank you, and I should have mentioned that sooner. Last year, the General Assembly asked us to do what we can to encourage projects from Tier 1 and Tier 2 counties. And, correct me, how many did we receive? 12 applications from Tier 1 and Tier 2 counties. So again, more of your rural counties, and those are being evaluated. So we definitely saw that, and I can provide to the committee a map which will show where all those.
Yeah, that'd be good.
I'll get that to Tracy.
That's good. Thank you.
No other questions? What? I'm sorry, I didn't see you, Representative.
I'd just jump in, Rich. Just a real quick question. Peach Pass is done under your responsibility. Is that right?
Yes.
Are we looking at doing anything with other states where you're driving down the Florida tollway, or is it already in place? now that more and more tollways are being prevalent around the South,
Yeah, so we call that interoperability. So if you have a Peach Pass on your car and an account in good standing, can you use it in other states and just have those tolls show up on your account? Yes, as we sit here today, we are currently interoperable with Florida, every single toll facility in Florida. So if you have a Peach Pass, you can drive through the express or no stop lanes on any facility in Florida, regardless of who's doing it.
because I know there's several different tolls in Florida, but
Right.
every single one you can do.
I've used it, Representative.
Have you? Okay, yeah, okay, okay. That didn't stop you, huh? Good.
Yeah.
We're also interoperable with North Carolina, and we're working hopefully before the year's out to add South Carolina to that mix. I'm also in conversations with the Easy Pass group, which is the predominant system in the Northeast, and eventually we'd like to connect with them as well.
Okay, good, good. Figured you were ahead of the game on that.
Let me ask you a quick question on 75 South in Henry County. You know, some people call it the Henry County Triangle instead of the Bermuda Triangle.
Yes.
And is that what else is going? You know, it's just a nightmare. Is this a toll road going to take it, work that out, or are we going to have to do other things?
Well, GDOT created that project exactly to deal with that bottleneck that occurs right at that break between 75 and 675. It's one of those mysteries. It could be a Saturday morning. You're thinking there's going to be an accident, and it's just congestion. So the whole purpose of this project is to provide a streamlined bypass past that bottleneck. And by the way, that project is scheduled to open in January 2017, so we're less than a year out. And within the next 3 to 4 months, you'll see us starting to advertise to try to get more people to sign up. But that's the whole purpose of that project. With the projected growth, there's a possibility, you know, the ideal situation is those that use the toll lane bypass the bottleneck, and because so many people shifted over, that's freed up capacity, so even the general purpose lanes flow freely. The reality is, I guess it's almost a good problem to have. Georgia's still growing, and so with the projected increases, it's hard to know until we open it whether the entire bottleneck that occurs in the general purpose lanes will totally disappear. Because we're adding capacity, but we're still attracting more people and businesses.
Matthew.
The toll, those new lanes that are going out, all those will be toll lanes, is that right? I mean, you will be paying
So it's all new
to drive on that, yeah.
Yes, that project is 12 miles long, 2 lanes, bidirectional, reversible, built in the median. So in the morning, they'll be headed towards the city. In the afternoon, we'll reverse them. We'll also have the ability to make changes, like on the weekend, if there's event-based traffic with Atlanta Motor Speedway, that type of thing.
But tollway, but it's that whole 12 lanes is all toll. You're paying a toll if you're on it at any time.
Unless you're on transit.
Yeah, right.
Yes.
Okay.
Any other questions? Thank you, and thank you for the job you're doing.
Thank you so much.
Economic development. Thank you, Commissioner Carr and Mr. Moffitt. Thank you so much for coming, and just go ahead with your presentation.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thanks to you and the members of the committee for having us today, and also for your support for economic development, for all that we've been doing. Just very, very briefly, I know this committee is well aware, but our project pipeline is full. We're very, very busy from a global commerce perspective, both internationally and domestically. International Trade Division continues to work with Georgia companies to find new markets, new companies overseas that we can work with in our 12 offices around the world. Workforce has been an incredible addition to our department, in that it is the #1 issue for every company and every industry is a trained, sustained, reliable pipeline of workers. And the partnerships that we have with the university system and the technical colleges are just fantastic. K-12, we're working on some new programs there as well, so that there is a stream of information from the private sector on what they will need down the line, and we're very, very pleased with the way that that has gone. Our centers of innovation, again, remain unique to our state, to show the partnerships that we have with Georgia Tech, University of Georgia, Middle Georgia College, and our six different centers. They continue to also work with small and mid-sized firms, again, where they don't have money for R&D, or where they're trying to find a new product, or produce a new product, or test a new product. There's a great opportunity for us to do that, so that continues to work well. It's obviously well documented. Our entertainment industry continues to grow. 250 film and television shows last year, $6 billion a year industry. Our arts continues to grow and be an integral part of what we do to recruit companies from a business perspective, and just kind of from the soul of who we are as Georgians. But the one thing I want to mention, and I want to thank this committee for your support last year for the governor's recommendation for $750,000 in tourism marketing. As we know, $57 billion a year industry. Last year, this committee approved a $750,000 addition, so that for the first time in 10 years we can be on television in 3 key markets. We will be on, slated to air for 6 weeks in April and May of this year, which is the prime vacation planning time, and we'll run in Jacksonville, Birmingham, and Greenville, Spartanburg, and Asheville. I think I told the Joint Committee Greenville, Spartanburg, and Charlotte. I misspoke. It's Asheville that we also will be airing those ads. So that's going to give us a great opportunity. So about $600,000 will be on broadcast TV and radio, and then $150,000 will be digital media, because we know that that's where most planners, or a lot of planners, are still going to make their travel plans. So we appreciate that. And again, to have the state divided up from a global commerce perspective, a tourism perspective, and a trade and workforce perspective, where we divide the state up into different regions and have folks living in those regions, continues to be a strength for us, and we greatly appreciate the support you have shown. In our 2017 recommended budget, I've asked John to mention just a couple of administrative changes that are in the budget, but the one that I want to mention is $200,000 additional dollars in global marketing. Madam Chair, you and I have spoken before. We at the department are committed to our international markets, and this will allow us to better serve the companies in our state as we do trade missions, as we try to find new markets overseas, to be able to take more companies and to do more as we market overseas. So this will allow us to have increased marketing materials, trade shows and trade missions, travel expenses, and research, so that we can better serve the companies that we work with. So we hope that you would look favorably upon that as well. And John, you have a couple that you want to comment on.
So like I think most agencies this year, there's been some administrative ads this year. Most of that is for the merit-based increase for all the state employees, and that goes through each program within our department. We also have a TeamWorks billing, the cost for the financial and HR service that a lot of state agencies use. We happen to be one of them. There's an increase in that for the increased billing that SAO pushes out to the agencies that participate in those programs. And then there's some one-time changes. As an agency, we get a lot of pass-throughs over the years. Last year, we had a pass-through for the National Infantry Museum. That's located over in Columbus, Georgia. That's a $500,000 reduction this year. It went in last year. We gave that money to them during this year's FY16 program. There's also elimination of the one-time funds for the Vietnam moving wall. That was a $10,000 add last year. That's coming out of our budget in 17. And the final one is a reduction only in the Civil War heritage trails. That's currently at $45,000. This $10,000 reduction reduced that down to $35,000. These are all located in our tourism program because they're all basically tourism related, attracting tourists to the state.
And Madam Chair, you had asked Commissioner Knowles about the bill to protect the negotiations, and what we are trying to do is we just simply want to clarify that all state agencies are covered only at the state level. Doesn't have to do with local communities, but just at the state level, that all state agencies are covered. We've got some great partnerships. We have to work with a lot of sister agencies, and we want to make sure that all of us are covered just for the duration of the negotiations. If a company locates or if they decide to go someplace else, that project is no longer active, then that protection would no longer exist. But we simply want to take what is a strength in this state, which are the partnerships that we all have at the state level, and make sure it doesn't become a weakness as our friends and neighbors may want to involve themselves in our negotiations.
Could you tell me where that bill is? So is it in the House or the Senate, or?
Senate bill.
Senate bill, we'll be looking for it in the House. Thank you.
Thank you.
Representative Peake.
Hey, Commissioner Carr, great work. I tell you, you guys and your team are doing good stuff. I tell you, you see results of it all over the place. As we continue to focus on the sexy stuff, the film and video and music industry, I hope you guys will continue to help us push. You know, we got 5 million square feet of that Brown and Williamson old building down in Bibb County that is sitting there ready for a film industry hotbed. I mean, it would really be ideal, similar to what's been done up in Peachtree City. Sure. And I sure hope that'll continue to get some focus and attention. I know our guys are chatting with you, but boy, it's be a great location right in the heart of the state.
Absolutely.
Get some attention. So.
Well, and it's been great to see that the industry is expanding beyond just a couple of different locations, and to see the private sector investing in the Pine Woods. Tyler Perry, Savannah has done a great job too. They just recently instituted an incentive down there as well, and have picked up a few shows. In fact, Sundance just occurred, and there were 4 Georgia film movies in Sundance, 3 of which were filmed in Savannah.
Yeah.
And the number one, the highest, the largest amount ever paid for a film is a Georgia film movie. It was $17.5 million.
Well, just don't forget us down in Bibb County. I think that's a great look. I mean, really, it's an ideal scenario. It's sitting there ready to be used. And so anyway,
absolutely.
Good work.
Thank you, though. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Thank you, and thank you for the job you're doing.
Thank you, man. Appreciate it. Thanks to the committee as well.
Georgia World Congress Center.
Some materials to hand out.
Good. Mr. Poe, thank you so much for coming. And I think most of us know Representative Strickland's wife, Lindsay. Lindsay Strickland, nice to have you here.
Good morning.
All right. Thank you. What page did we find that on so I can tell him?
It's attached to economic development.
Okay.
But it's on the bond package.
It's in the bond package?
Under the
bond package. Yes, sir. Let me see what page. Sorry, it's back towards the end. It's the last page.
The last page.
Yeah, page 5.
On page 5 of the bond package, you'll find World Congress Center. Thank you so much. And
yes,
if you'd like to go ahead.
Surely. Thank you for the opportunity to be in front of you this morning. Before I get into the specifics of the 2 items that we are here before you to seek your support of, I just want to give you a few report card relative to the Congress Center over this past year. The Georgia World Congress Center Authority hosted approximately 2.3 million people through our campus this past fiscal year. We had a $1.4 billion economic impact on the state of Georgia, which resulted in approximately almost $73 million in state sales tax revenues that are part of your considerations for other programs. We sustain a little over 15,000 jobs that support the convention trade show industry here in the metro area predominantly, but certainly throughout the state. If you consider the investment that the state has made in the Georgia World Congress Center throughout its history, going back to the mid-'70s when it first opened, the state has put in a little over $630 million into the facilities that are on the campus. That has generated over its life $1.4 billion in sales tax to the state of Georgia. So returning on that investment that you've made in the facilities of over $700 million in sales tax back to the state of Georgia. And we've included in your packet just a brief history of the investments that have been made in the facilities from the mid-'70s on up into the current day, as well as touched on, and we'll touch on a bit later in the presentation, some of our future visioning for the campus going forward into the years to come. The two projects that we are asking your support on relate to totally $7 million, $3.5 million for flooring, which would be inclusive of carpet and hardscape that we're continuing to improve within the campus itself, as well as an additional amount of funding for Centennial Olympic Park, principally identified for a part of our vision there. That investment of $3.5 million is actually leveraging over $20 million in private dollars that would come into the total park vision that we've identified for Centennial Olympic Park and remaking that. So it's truly a public-private partnership. We've received to date $16 million in private sector donations in support of the park vision, and we've included within your packet some slides really starting on page 11 of your presentation that would give you a sense of what we are looking to do in the park, the largest one of which is the acquisition and demolition of the Metro Chamber building. We've entered into a purchase option agreement. We'll exercise the option on the purchase of that building this next month, and then we'll demolish it towards the end of the year and then restore that as reflected on slide 12, what the park would look like absent the Metro Chamber building being in that location. We've also have, as part of the overall park vision, the creation of a pedestrian mall where International Boulevard once existed. We've closed International Boulevard through the park and are preparing with the private sector donations that we get to really to restore that to what it was originally planned to be, and that is a pedestrian mall through the park. So those are the two key projects that we're seeking your support on, the flooring, hardscape, and carpet replacements, and predominantly focusing in on Georgia-based companies for that work. And it will be a continuation of what we have done in the previous year with your support on capital funds to the Congress Center. We also invest out of our own resources capital dollars into the campus. Over the last several years, that's exceeded about $45 million that we, out of our own funds, put into the park, generated off the business that we have coming into the facility. We don't seek operations support from the General Assembly. We're self-sufficient and will continue to be self-sufficient on an operating level. So the capital dollars that we seek, we believe, are providing a continuation of your investment in the facilities with the economic return that we have spoken of previously in our presentation this morning. The one last thing I want to draw your attention to is some work we're doing currently that can be found on slide 17. We're currently in the throes of investigating a connected piece. If you look at it more as a small exhibit hall that would be between our B and C building. We're analyzing that from a cost perspective and would anticipate, subject to the governor's approvals, would see that coming forward to the General Assembly in the next couple of years. We believe that project, based on our market analysis, will sustain an additional $600 million in economic impact to the state of Georgia based on the analysis that we've done thus far, and would allow us to continue to be very active in that marketplace of trade shows and conventions that are in the million square foot range. And this connected piece, not only for some of our existing clients, which includes the International Poultry and Egg Association based in Georgia that's been in our facilities since its opening in 1976, and keep them in Georgia, keep them in Atlanta. So we see this as really a critical component of our future viability as a convention trade show destination, and will continue to allow us to attract major events to the state and certainly to Metro Atlanta. So that would conclude our remarks this morning, and would be happy to respond to any questions you may have.
Thank you. Do I have any questions? That was, gosh. No questions? What, huh? Oh, I know you've got a question, Representative. Oh, make it.
Yeah. Make it quick. And this may be, I'm not sure this is directed to you or not, but it's, you know, we've been debating all this religious freedom bill type, and I know there's concern about what?
Simple question.
I know there's concern about, you know, what the impact that it could have on conventions and so forth coming. And so my question to you is, are you feeling that? Are you getting questions from potential groups that are coming here who are saying, well, we may not come because of so and so and so? Is that a fair question to ask of you? I mean,
certainly. You only have to look to what occurred in Indiana this last year relative to a bill. I'm not sure that it was exactly the same, similar, which there was a significant negative response to that act that was passed and then subsequently was changed. And NCAA was, which is headquartered there, was one of the most vocal. And I would have to point out to you that we have confirmed for the state of Georgia the NCAA Final Four in 2020, the college football championship, which is in 2018, and we have a number of convention trade show groups that are monitoring the activities surrounding that, that have made it known that if the General Assembly and the state were to act on that bill, then they would give serious consideration for looking at alternative locations for their meetings.
So it clear. I mean, it is having an impact.
It hasn't yet, but a number of organizations have mentioned that they're watching this and following very closely.
Okay, thanks. Keep up the good work too. You're doing a great job.
Representative Dudgeon.
Thank you. You may not know I'm taking early retirement from the General Assembly this year, and I appreciate the present you give me, which you haven't asked for any money related to the stadium this time, so I appreciate that. So I just wanted to say thank you.
Thank you. Representative Cook.
I got a comment and then kind of a question and a comment back to Representative Peake's question to you. I would like to add that there are 30 states that currently have a RFRA, to be clear about that, and none of those states have lost the NCAA anything, Final Four, national championship game. They haven't lost a Super Bowl, etc. So that while that's could be a concern for some, in reality it has not happened. So I'd like to say that too. Let me follow with and say that y'all are doing a fantastic job. I appreciate the job that y'all are doing. And one, I guess, not a concern really that I have, but moving forward, I want to make sure that y'all continue to do what y'all been doing, which again, thank you for being good stewards of the taxpayer money that we do allocate. The job that y'all are doing there at the facilities are fantastic. But that being said, as we move forward into the future, I want to make sure that we're cognizant of, as we do continue to expand, that we do so responsibly. So down the road, 20, 30, 40, 50 years down the road, we don't have such a huge complex that it takes up so much taxpayer monies moving forward. But thank you for the job that y'all do.
And appreciate your comment, and would add on to that we approach any investment, whether out of our own resources or what we seek for your support on, as really making a business case. If we can't support it from a business standpoint, then why are we doing it? And so we appreciate your comments and want to reinforce that we approach those sort of investments in a very similar vein, that and have a board that we have to seek their support as well. So thank you.
And I'd just like to say, in response to Representative Peake's question, I appreciate the way you just answered the question, and you did not give your opinion or voice what could happen. Right. You just simply answered the question from Representative Peake. And thank you. Thank you so much for coming.
Appreciate it. Thank you.